Fear and anxiety is on the increase in New Zealand. A lot of people are witnessing the New Zealand economy being disassembled. And what we're seeing is a lot of people, their jobs are being threatened, they're losing their jobs, their accommodation is being threatened, they're losing their houses. And what we're also witnessing is the segregation even within the family unit, where some people want that medical procedure whereas other family members don't. And we're seeing the disassembling of the family unit as well. Now here at the Brilin Functional Medicine, we have a hall and we have regular meetings, and someone invited Aaron along to talk about managing anxiety and managing stress. And I have to say I was quite impressed. First of all, I thought, oh my goodness, Jim Carrey's here, but no, it wasn't, it was just Aaron. So Aaron, please introduce yourself briefly, and what advice do you have for those who are suffering anxiety and fear at the moment?
Thank you, William. Aaron McLoughlin. I've been working with people since 1996 using what I call structural psychology, which is a mix of clinical hypnosis, neuro-linguistic programming, psychology, and a bunch of other things that over the years I've put together. I've trained people all around New Zealand and Australia to do certain things, and I've specialised in anxiety and sleep for the last probably 15. Well, I mean, anyone in our game doing what we do specialises in anxiety, and that is concurrent with sleep issues. And what we're seeing globally at the moment is a huge rise in anxiety, and coupled with that, sleep issues. And then all the other psychosomatic illnesses, physical responses to those problems.
We have a situation where people can't even sleep at night because they're thinking about everything that's happening in the future. This whole FFF has been increased, the sympathetic state, which is fight, flight and freeze. So what would you suggest for someone to mentally regulate? What functional advice?
The thing about what's going on at the moment is that it's all to do with the future. So anxiety works with respect to how we perceive the future and real or imagined events. The challenge that we have at the moment is we don't have any clarity being defined for us or given to us about where we're going in the future. Every single day we are given a new update which, if anything, confuses and scrambles our perception of where we're going in the future. We've got different levels now, we've got different traffic lights, we've got all sorts of symbolic and metaphorical ways of kind of defining where this future is going. And it's all coming, and this is the important part, it's all coming from outside of us. So it's coming from politics, coming from medicine, it's coming from all these places, which is fine. And yet what it's not doing is helping us to define our own personal future direction. So what that does is it scrambles, for want of a better way of putting it, how we are aligning ourselves with our personal future. And if we're trying to build a healthy immune system, for example, if we don't have clarity around where we're going, like an outcome, a vision, and if that doesn't have any alignment with a sense of what is valuable to us, our values, our immune system drops. We feel isolated, we feel undervalued, we feel misunderstood, we feel alone, we feel disenfranchised. And what you were saying moments ago about whether we're going to lose our job or not, whether we're going to lose our house or not, whether we're going to be able to pay the mortgage or not, these sorts of things, and the worst case scenario, whether our husband, partner, wife actually believes what we believe and is doing what we do, and what that means going forward. We literally we just don't have a sense of where we're going. And structurally in the mind, that is just a minefield. Does that?
It makes perfect sense. And when we look at the, this is your discussion, not my discussion, but when we look at the most successful businesses in the world, they have visions.
They have a very strong, like Monsanto has a 200-year business plan, you know, as an example, and subsequently they turn over more money than South Africa a year. So fundamentally, you know, they know where they're going, and yet most people struggle to know what's going to happen next week. if we don't have a sense of, and it was Terence McKenna who said once, you know, if you don't define your pathway, someone else will define it for you. And that's when we lose our values connection to our future, and we lose motivation, we lose meaning. And those things, as Viktor Frankl once wrote in his famous book, Man's Search for Meaning, having gone through 3 concentration camps as a Jewish psychiatrist and survived, when we lose a sense of meaning because we have no end in sight, we drop, we fall, we lose hope. And so the essence of our conversation is, how do we generate that again? Who's in control of our personal futures? And it's us. Fundamentally, we have to say, well, okay, what can I control in my life right now? What is something I control in my daily life? And it comes down to the mundane. If you don't know what's going to happen with the government or with the regulations or with the rules or whatever, and you need to create some structure to remove this what I call heightened extreme level of caution, which is called anxiety. But if we start reframing it into caution, then we've got kind of a calibration scale. Makes sense? Mm. So we have a normal degree of caution, which is get in the car, put the seatbelt on. Get to the edge of the road, look left, right, left again. This is a normal degree of caution. What we're all running at the moment is like 4 to 5 out of 10 of like medium to high end of caution, which is, you know, called anxiety. Start calibrating it to caution. When you wake up in the morning, start thinking, okay, where am I at? Then think about something that you know is going to happen in the day. Classic is you're going to have lunch. So picture yourself, imagine yourself out there in the future having just finished lunch. What that starts to do is it gives this primal part of you that's literally, your brain is going, anxiety is just your brain going, am I going to die? That's it. So people are looking forward to the 5th of November, the 15th of November, the 1st of January next year, and they're literally being given all these mandates and laws and blah, 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 and they're all going, oh my God, and their subconscious is going, I'm going to die. Because it seems so overwhelming. We can't control what they do. We can't control any of that. But what we can do is say, okay, what is happening today that I know I'm going to get to the other side of? And we start building a habit around that. So I know today I'm going to finish and I'm going to get into my car. I can picture myself right now, I can see myself getting into my little red Yaris, smiling. Now I'm smiling not because, wow, it went really great, William, you know, nailed it. I'm smiling because it's done. Yeah? It's not about, and this is with the 5th of November, or the 15th actually. So what we do is we picture ourselves the 16th of November and not even smiling necessarily. And I say this with all due respect because it's a very challenging time. Picture yourself at the 16th of November alive. It sounds crazy, but picture yourself waking up the next morning smiling because the sun has come up. Picture yourself having had breakfast on the 16th. And your brain is suddenly going to go, oh, I'm still alive. It's going to drop from the extreme caution and it's going to drop down a notch or two. So you go from 9 out of 10 and start calibrating yourself. 9 out of 10 down to 7. Even if you're thinking about this while you're listening, part of you is going, oh, I never thought of that. Right, okay, and a part of you is already doing this because it needs to know that you're okay. You're okay. You're gonna be okay. Think of the past. When you were a young child or you were a young adult or whatever, and some things were coming up and they felt insurmountable. And then suddenly you're on the other side going, what was that about? You know, when you drop that cautionary level because you've identified the other side, see yourself in a month, see yourself at Christmas, see yourself maybe the 20th of January or whatever it might be, but see yourself out there and you're just smiling because this stuff is behind you. It's not because you nailed it. It's not because I'm the best guy ever. It's because you're on the other side of this thing. Make that picture bright. Make that picture clear. Make it, we just stand there like this. Yep, I'm on the other side. It's how marathon runners do it. You know, very few marathon runners imagine themselves running a marathon because that's really demotivating, because I don't know if you've talked to marathon runners, but generally, unless they're peak performers, marathon running is not a cool thing to do. It doesn't feel good. You hit a what do they call it? A tipping point where you switch off sometimes and your body's just going with it. But generally, how do they start? You see yourself having crossed the line. That's the number one, because that's actually what you want. And you don't see yourself smiling because I did really well and I got first place. You see yourself having crossed the line. So that drops this flight or fight down a notch. Yeah? Mm-hmm. That drops down, and suddenly your mind can go back and relax, and it can start thinking creatively, curiously about all the things you've been missing because you've been in the flight or fight. Does this make sense? Is this kind of useful?
Yep.
So it's a strategy that is structural, meaning we don't have to get into the content. We don't have to get into the who's doing this or why is this. Clear your mind of that. Just start habitually seeing yourself. Like I know tonight, I'm doing a talk tonight. I can see myself returning home. I can see myself having brushed my teeth. It's crazy. But it's mundane stuff that just drops all of the potential high caution, all the dopamine, all of that cortisol, just drops it down enough so we can relax a bit and start seeing the things we've been missing. And it also tells us, wait a minute, I'm in control of this. I'm the one defining what's right for me.
That's the big thing, is we have a choice. We can live by the law of accident or the law of internal locus of control. When we're, you've heard of that.
Yes, I have.
Yes.
Nicely put.
Well, okay, well.
In spiritual terms, they say object referral or self-referral.
I think ultimately it's about, you're 100% responsible, you're in charge, you're responsible, the buck stops with you. It is so easy to allow ourselves to get into a downward spiral of fear and stress and anxiety. And I like what you put it, is the fact that you're thinking forward and past the situation because your subconscious is essentially kind of saying doom on the 15th of November. But now you're trying to reprogram that subconscious by saying, well, actually, you are going to be living on the 16th of November.
You'll be alive.
Yeah.
You'll be alive. This can't actually kill you.
And unfortunately, when we are in a sympathetic state or fight, flight, freeze, and our cortisols are released, it causes a lot of inflammation through the body, but also what it does, it causes brain inflammation, and so all of a sudden we don't think quite clearly. It's like, I regarded myself as a great driver when I was a young boy, but as soon as my father was in the car, it's like I couldn't function at all. Yeah. If I can play the piano and I can be absolutely perfect concert pianist scales, as soon as I push the record button on the camera, mistakes all the time. So it's actually that fear which inhibits our judgment. So do you have any more advice? Like, it's all very well saying, having vision and clarity and that kind of stuff. How do you feel about clear written goals, mission statements, and perhaps every morning absorbing yourself in those goals so that perhaps on the forefront of your mind all day is success?
I think it's really important. It's a great question. What I would say though is when you're dealing with daily anxiety, it's too much. We have it like we might be in business, or we might be, we'll have goals. We have things that are important to us. We have a vision. Businesses have a mission statement, that sort of thing. The thing that but when the cortisol is really high and we're just wanting to bring it down, we have to go back to very, very raw, basic stuff. Do I get to tomorrow morning? It sounds ludicrous because we know we kind of will. But what we want to do is, as you were saying, when we can drop these cortisol levels, we can drop this sympathetic aspect down, we can open up to more creativity and possibility. The way to start doing that is go real basic nuts and bolts, and that is I can see myself 10 minutes after waking up tomorrow morning smiling because the night time's done. I can see myself getting back home having dropped the kids off from school. Just simple things that train us to look into the future safely, securely, and we can see ourselves having done this thing. And the seeing yourself is really important. Anxiety, when it becomes habit, is an unconscious process where we go into the future unconsciously and associate, that means be in the body, in the future real or imagined event. Freaking out, technical term. So we're freaking out in this future event. And that's very demotivating. So drop back into the present, take control, think about something you know is coming up, then picture yourself out there on the other side of that event. Smiling because it's done. Not smiling, as I was repeating myself, but not smiling because, well, you know, it was excellent, all that sort of stuff. The challenge with goals is there's always the opportunity for disappointment. And we can't control all of the nuance of what the environment will throw at us. And so that can generate anxiety. Well, maybe it won't happen. Yeah. Come back to the things you know are going to happen. Come back to the things you know you're in control of on the daily basis, the weekly basis. Keep it really basic. And I'm saying this because we want to start creating a habit that I'm in control of my experience going forward. Then the cortisol, everything drops down and we suddenly have clarity. And at that point, we can start feeling, thinking more creatively, more compassionately, more openly around and about our vision, our values, and that's where we can start benchmarking our goals or our vision going
So
forward.
that's an excellent advice, whereas we have a situation where we are in intense anxiety and you're basically saying, let's keep it really simple, go back to the raw basics, just visualize yourself in the future, being alive, and that's going to get you through that rough time. But and when you're ready, start formulating a new you, so to speak, because out of any crisis, there's opportunities. And the way that my wife and I live, well, if something really bad happens, we think, well, this can be an opportunity to open new doors if old doors is closed. And I know that my wife and I, every single morning, we really look at the integrities of who we are, and every morning we focus on that. We focus on what we want to achieve, and these sometimes it can be quite basic just to get through the day. But what we're finding is by doing that and meditating and discussing it, so if you've got a partner that you can discuss this with, this is great, then it builds a comfort, like a little barrier, and you feel the security because you know you're heading in the right direction. Even if you don't know what your major definite purpose is and what's going to happen, it's like, oh my God, I might lose my house. Well, we sometimes focus, well, what's the worst case scenario?
It's a good thing to do, because even in the worst case scenario, you don't have to go far to read an autobiography or see something online or whatever to see, wait a minute, that person got through the worst case scenario. Yeah. There's always something to remind us that the spirit within us is just so profoundly strong. I was giving a talk last night, and the thing that came to mind with respect to some questions I had was you're not broken. If you're feeling a little anxiety or even a goodly about even a 7 or 8 out of 10 right now, if you're not, I'd start worrying. If you're not feeling kind of cautious about what's going on in the world right now, mate, I'd start really be curious about that. It's really natural because there's a part of us going, this is not right. This doesn't feel right. And we have to trust that. So that's what the flight or fight, that's what the heightened degree of caution is all about. That's kind of supposed to be happening, because in many respects, there is threat. Yeah? What we have to do is then go, okay, well, that means I come back to what am I in control of today? And what is something mundane coming up that I know I'm going to get to the other side of? Picture that. Just keep habitually doing that.
So Aaron, you've allowed more time in your schedule to see more people, and that's what you do. You have your own practice. You're also an author of a couple of books here. Did you want to have an opportunity to quickly...
Yeah, sure. I wrote a book a long time ago, back in 1999. It was following, I used to have asthma. I had asthma since I was 4. Well, I was going to get to that. This is the second version. The first book was called The Fascination Principle, and it's based on the fact that I was mowing the lawn one day. I'd had asthma. I was living in Hamilton. Not many people know Hamilton at the time, back in 2001 or something, had the highest incidence of asthma in the Western world. Actually had the highest number of therapists per capita in the Western world, wow. And surrounded by agrochemicals floating on the wind, no matter what direction you're in. Anyway, I was mowing the lawn one day, and I'd been doing hypnosis, and I was doing a degree in psychology, finishing it, a number of things, and I started getting the symptoms, and I said to myself, well, that's fascinating. For the first time in my life, I looked at my symptomology in a completely different fashion. And 45 minutes later, or 30 minutes later, something like that, I was bending down to turn off the mower. And I suddenly realized the asthma had gone. It just wasn't there anymore. And that's what this book, Rapid Inspired Change, is about, the structure of how we can turn our symptomology, which is an extremely powerful and intelligent system of communication, how we can turn it from, the fear that we've been trained to have around our symptomology into something which can actually become a healing process in itself. And then following that, because I went through a very long extended time of chemical poisoning with paraquat, I had insomnia, and I had an epiphany one night. I tend to get epiphanies and then shift things very quickly. I'm quite lucky. Where I wasn't sleeping, and I shifted it one night when my inner voice just said blah, 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 and the blah, 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 blah is in the book, so I won't give it away, but these are on my website as downloads. It's extremely expensive to print books now, unfortunately. $25 a book, unless you do 1,000 of them.
I'll put the links to that in the description.
And so the essence of Better Sleep Sooner is I'm not very fussed on the story of, if someone comes to me and says, I'm not sleeping, and then they start telling me their story of their life, there's an element to that that's very important. But actually what keeps us awake is how we're thinking, not what we're thinking about. And that's what I've found to be extremely useful, and that's what I call structural psychology. So the structural aspect is, how am I thinking about my future? How am I thinking about sleep? And I'll give you a hint. When you get into bed at night, picture yourself tomorrow morning smiling because the night is done. Not smiling because you slept well, not frowning because you slept shit, technical term. Smiling because the night is done. And you might be surprised what happens with that tip alone. So it's the how we go about the thinking, not really the content. I call it the Shortland Street of psychology. Shortland Street can go for 20 years. Coronation Street goes for 50.
I remember that as a little kid.
Yeah, it just, and it just keeps going because it's on the carousel of content. But if you change the structure, moved it to a different street in the rural area, you can't have Coronation Street. It won't work. And it's simply because suddenly the structure is changed to rural, where everyone's, 100, 200 kilometre apart. You can't run Coronation Street that way. So you could have the same people, they could have a pub, but you won't have Coronation Street because the structure of it has shifted. I hope that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. You're taking on some new clients at the moment. Do you have time for that?
Yes.
Okay, so
yes.
we'll have your details. I really appreciate you coming
Thanks
on
for
and
having
talking
me
to us.
along. Yeah.
Well, I think it's really important because, as I said, the fear and anxiety is on the increase now. Unfortunately, one thing that we specialise here is chronic disease and cancer, and the number one thing is getting on top of your mental utensil. If you have fear, if you're in fight, flight, sympathetic state and you're not in parasympathetic state, you cannot heal. And so the number one thing is to look at trying to get over top of traumas. And it's a big subject that we can't cover right now. But what I like about your approach is it's about, you've got all this content all over the place. And in fact, I suppose you could almost use the analogy of a combination lock. And we might have 5 numbers to undo the lock. And what you're suggesting is it doesn't matter what the numbers are, they just have to be in the right sequence. And even a child, if it had the right sequence, can open up a lock. And a lock, of course, is structure.
And I want to add something that's really important. I'm sorry to interrupt, but the one thing about all therapy generally is it relies on this thing called talk. Yeah. I was running a group the other night, and I wanted to demonstrate a thing called zero content. This is very important. One of the things that stops people from going to see someone for help is that they're going to have to talk about what happened. You don't. So as long as you know that the event, and I'm talking about trauma, for example, is if you know that the event started and the event finished, that's all we need to know. I, as the coach or the facilitator of your process, I don't want to know what happened. I don't. I don't want that in my consciousness. What I know, though, is that you're holding this trauma together in a specific way. I don't want to know, I don't need to know to help. As long as you know what it is and that it has a beginning and an end, that means it has structure. You don't even have to think much about what happened. We can restructure it, and suddenly you have a different set of choices about how you remember that experience. It's so important. We have the technology, the psychological technology, to not have to talk about what happened. Now, a lot of people are going to say, yeah, but how do you get the learnings from this? The learnings are only ever released to you when the trauma is dampened. How do we know trauma is dampened? Because we are no longer in it, we are outside of it and viewing it. Technically, that's how it works. Structurally, that's how it works. And then once you're outside, you have a different perspective and you can learn what you need to learn from that experience. You cannot, when you're in it, drowning in it. It's like trying to learn to swim while you're trying to suck in air. Does that make sense? So it's so important. We can work on pretty much anything, and I do not need to know what we're working on. And I keep looking at the green screen and that's really important. Yeah.
So I guess to sum up,
Thanks.
if Aaron is in a room and the light bulb needs to change, Aaron can change the light bulb whether it wants to change or not. There we are. How's that?
No, you have to want to change that light bulb.
Some people are going, what?
Well, yeah, really. Okay. Good try.
Yeah.
The fundamental thing is, yes, and the essence of it is, you have to want to do the work. And yet when you don't have to deal with the narrative or the story or the content, as we call it, the work is so much easier.
Have a look at Aaron's website.
It's a
his
bit
links
basic, but there's a lot of videos, so you can watch videos,
okay. Yep. And if you want to make an appointment with him.
And you can buy this book. The other one will be up. I've got a few copies in real time. You can get the download. I
started reading this and fell asleep. Very good. Okay, thank you very much for watching.